The journey is conversations with ordinary people about stories of transformation and how we may have had setbacks in our life and how we persevered through those, how we've learned from those obstacles, and how they've maybe helped us on our path today. So, Rob Young, welcome to the journey. Let me explain a little bit about what the journey is about. And the journey is just having ordinary individuals on the show, so that we can capture their stories of transformation, being able to, for different things that have happened in their life, how they have maybe had adversity, and then what did they learn from that adversity? How did they fail forward? Regardless if that was either via athletics or the arts, or maybe more serious things regarding mental illness or addiction, or just how they may have changed themselves, transformed themselves, recreated themselves regarding business or work or whatever that might have been. So welcome to the journey.
Well, thank you for having me.
No problem. Yeah. So Rob, as we always start off with, I want you to tell us a little bit about who you are and where you grew up and that aspect of it. But before we jump into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about what do you do for fun? When you have an opportunity to have fun, what do you do?
So I love spending time outside. Okay. That's the great outdoors is kind of been kind of a therapy for me for a lot of the years and I grew up on a farm, so I grew up in the country and spending a lot of time outside. So whenever I have free time, I love to be outside.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. And I know that you had told me about a trip that you had gone on, a couple different trips in the last couple of years, and I know that those were some pretty big experiences. We'll get in those a little bit, but you said you grew up on a farm. Where was that at, and what kind of farm was that?
So I say farm. It's more of a ranch, I guess, if we're being technical. It's a 40-acre property out near Kirkland, Illinois, about 30 minutes south of Rockford. And we mostly had horses, but I feel like we've had every kind of animal possible over the years. But yeah, it was a kind of an ideal childhood, being out there and just being able to run and play. And we had hay and straw lofts, and so just kind of a really fun kind of way to grow up as a kid, to just have all this freedom and all this ability to be outside.
Sure. Now, was that your dad's? Was your dad the one who raised the horses, or was it your mom, or how'd that all come about?
So my whole family's been involved in horses my entire life. So I'm kind of the black sheep of the family for not being involved in horses. So my dad races and trains horses at the racetrack in Chicago, and then my mom's actually a full-time barn manager there at the property.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so it's mostly these are race horses.
Some race horses from the track, but we board for other people that want to come out and ride. So we have an indoor and outdoor facility for people to ride, and then my sister actually taught lessons there for many years.
So. Now, do you ride too, or I mean, obviously, I'm guessing you can't get away from that riding, but didn't necessarily pursue that the same way as your family members.
Yeah, so I was born, as you alluded to, I was basically born in a saddle. There's pictures of me when I'm weeks old, being held by my mom on a horse. So I know how to ride. Just never something that really captured my interest. And so from a young age, I definitely leaned more towards the athletics portion of it instead of the riding.
And what sports were you involved with in high school and college?
Well, when I was younger, I played everything. Soccer was kind of my main sport, but I played basketball, I played football. I just loved being out there and competing. And as I got a little older, you have to get a little more focused on a certain sport or something to do, and then that's when tennis kind of came into my life.
All right. So what high school did you go to? Kirkland High School? No.
So I went to Boylan for 2 years, my freshman and sophomore year. And then at that point, I was really getting to the top level around locally for tennis. And I actually played in a camp down at IMG Bolletary in Florida between my sophomore and junior year of high school. And at that point, they were pretty excited about the way I played, and so they offered me a scholarship to go down there and actually attend their school down there my junior year, which I did.
So then your junior senior you were playing. You went to essentially a prep school or a bordering school to prepare you for that next level as far as being a tennis player.
Right. Yeah, I did that my junior year. Senior year, I actually graduated from Kirkland. Came back, but junior year it was a very college style. I'd go to class for 3 or 4 hours a day. wake up at 6 a.m., play tennis for 3-4 hours. We have another 3-4 hour session in the afternoon. And then every weekend tournaments someplace, either around Florida or we went all around the world playing tournaments.
Okay. And then, and what did you do with the tennis? So how far did you bring it? What did you do with that?
So, well, I played Division I college tennis, so I did earn a scholarship to college, which I'm very fortunate and grateful to have. And then I did play some professional tennis, and earned a few paychecks. But it's a tough thing to make a living on.
Yeah, I can just imagine. So for you, when you look back on playing tennis, either during those years when you were in high school or in what college were you at?
So I went to Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville.
Oh, okay. And that's where you had the scholarship.
Right.
And played for them. Okay. And then when you did get your pro card and you played with that, what would you say if there was something that you could grab from that experience and competing at those different levels, what would you say that something that you could kind of grab out of that and maybe a life lesson from that?
Well, what drew me to tennis in the first place that's so different than all the other sports, the team sports that I played, is that tennis has these, like, you enter a tennis court and it's 1v1. It's like a boxing match in a way, a non-physical kind of boxing match, because while you're not touching your opponent, there's all these different jabs and these different moves, and there's endless possibilities whenever you're striking a tennis ball that you can hit it so many different ways. And so I really love the creativity first and foremost of tennis.
Okay.
And then also the competition level, and the fact that you're entering this ring with this opponent, and one of you is going to be the winner and one of you is going to exit the loser. And just the resiliency that kind of you build, knowing that, like, hey, I can't get out of here unless I give up or I win. You have to get out there and you have to compete every single point, and then dealing with failure as well, because you're going to miss a lot of shots, you're going to lose a lot of points. You could have a perfect set and play excellent tennis, and you're still going to lose many, many points against a quality opponent. And so just moving on, and just when you miss a shot or when something doesn't go your way, just being able to kind of take a deep breath and just kind of be able to move to the next point and build that kind of resiliency moving forward. And
a lot of times we'll talk about the idea that at the time of a match, the time when the game's on, that is only whatever the given amount of time is, but there's a lot of preparation leading into that. There's a lot of stuff. So tell us a little bit about what it was like to prepare yourself, the practice level, to be able to play at that level, because everyone else, there's equal amount of talent, right?
Yeah.
And so what did you, looking back on that, what did you notice regarding the preparation, the practice part of it? How important is that? And what would you say from your perspective, what part did that play?
Well, I think tennis is kind of it's obviously not as popular a sport as like a basketball or a soccer or a football in the United States. And I think some of that has to do with that when a kid picks up a tennis racket, he's not just going to be able to hit it well. It's a very learned kind of repetition skill. And I'm not insinuating that team sports are not. I mean, certainly they take a lot of practice and skill as well, but you're at least doing it with other people, and it's fun, and you're on this team. There's this kind of fun atmosphere around it. So tennis, just a lot of grinding, a lot of failure, a lot of and I'm kind of a perfectionist, and so that always drove my pursuits. To always hey, this could always be better. I'm good, but this, I could be great, or I could be much better, and so doing that and really logging those hours on the court, because there's many hours, early mornings, hot, cold, you name it, you're playing outside, inside, and just to get the edge once you actually enter the court and that competition level, as you were mentioning, it's very mental. It's a very, very mental sport. And so as you said, there are two people that have equal skill, if one believes a little bit more than the other, that comes out. And that could be the difference. That could be two kids who one kid could possibly beat the other, but the other one just rolls over him because he had that belief and he had that swagger. And when you're dealing in that momentum in a 1v1 kind of competition setting, it really makes a difference.
And I do think, sometimes there's just an element of that confidence that comes because some kids are just more confident. Some individuals are just more confident than others because of because of previous experiences and because of things that have been shared with them and things like that. And then there's an element that the confidence comes as a direct result of putting the hours in, a direct result of putting the practices. And even though, of course, like any type of competition, when you're going against someone, you never know for sure. You can't 100% prepare for it because it's a living, breathing experience, right? And
well, you can't fake it. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, if you didn't put in the preparation, if you don't feel confident that, hey, I'm feeling good about my game right now, and that's gonna shine through on the court. Yeah, you can't just go in there and just be all bravado. You got to back it up, and so it takes a certain amount of preparation, a certain amount of like for instance, when I was younger, I used to psych myself out when I'd play like better opponents. I'd look up, how they did against similar opponents, and he beat this guy and I lost to him, and he's ranked this and he's ranked that. Or he's from this big college or this big university. They're really good. And then when I got a little older, I'm like, none of that matters.
Yeah.
None of that matters. And I just walk in. I'd make sure that I was ready, and if there was a scouting report on what his game was like, and I'd obviously have a game plan going in, but I didn't psych myself out as much, about he's from a big school. I don't care. No. It's like he's a player, and I have a job to do to beat him.
It is an interesting, and maybe we can just touch on this because I've just always been curious about this idea of a scouting report's one thing, right? So even though there is a subjective element to it, there is an aspect where we break the game down, break down a person's play, and you can objectively look at what's being done, right? And or I should say, what has been done up until this point. And I think that's a phenomenal way to look at your opponent's tendencies. What can what can you do to play with that? And I think that's a phenomenal tool that you can use. But let's talk a little bit about rankings and ratings. So what's your thoughts about ranking and ratings?
In terms of like with kids' developments, or in terms of just...
more from a standpoint of like you were just talking about, you would look at someone's ranking, and if they were in the top 10, let's assume in the nation or whatever it was, that could be an intimidating factor. But in reality, it doesn't necessarily matter on that day. You could go out and you could beat that person who may have been ranked and you weren't ranked, or whatever it may have been. But what are your thoughts overall about the rankings, or I said ratings, but I guess it would be the same type of thing in this particular scenario? What is your thoughts about the subjectivity of that, and then how much that plays into everything?
Well, it's you're right. It's psychological. When it all comes down to it. You obviously earn those rankings by previous experience or by previous results. But when you get onto the court, that ranking doesn't give you any advantage. Doesn't give you any tangible, real advantage. It's not like you're going to start up a couple games because you're ranked number 1 or whatever, and I'm ranked number 10. Right. When we enter the court, we both have an even playing field, and as I kind of learned to kind of like let that kind of go in terms of that psychological edge, because if you do let it have a psychological edge, it will affect the way you play. You're going to play more tentative. You're going to let him kind of dictate his kind of game that he wants to play, and once I kind of wrap my brain around that, hey, and the opposite is true too. I'd underestimate opponents because they weren't ranked very highly, or if they're from a small school or something like that. I'd go in there and I'd be like, I don't need to work that hard today. I just need to get the ball in, and they're going to miss or something like that. And they'd bring their A game, and I'd be reeling. Yeah. So you get out there and you play who's across the net from you, and you do your best to kind of exploit their weaknesses and obviously play your own game And it's a beautiful thing because that all changes. Somebody could be on a certain day and off a certain day, and so the game plan I came in with now is not the game plan I got to execute to win.
Right.
And so that kind of like adaptability, that kind of nimble kind of thinking, it's something unique kind of to athletics that I just really enjoyed, especially tennis.
Yeah. Well, and again, when I say that, it's not to, start this movement of taking away rankings or anything like that. It's more from an element, I think, of recognizing that the rankings are part of the game, mm-hmm. and they're a psychological part of the game, not a physical part of the game. Mm-hmm. And then because of that, they can serve both ways, right? It could be an intimidating factor, but it also could be, if you're ranked higher, then you may play not to lose instead of playing to win.
Right.
And so I think that's the part that always fascinates me and intrigues me with all types of sports, is because it is this moving element, moving entity that is always changing. It's not predictable. And I was listening to some commentators yesterday regarding a football game, and they were talking about making adjustments. In this particular case, it was talking about the defense. The defense makes adjustments every time they're off the field, not just at halftime. Mm-hmm. And I think that was well said, because I don't know necessarily if the average fan recognizes that they're constantly making adjustments to try to do something different against the opponent, or what is working really well right now. And I think that's the part that very similar to our work life, right? And that we have to constantly be making adjustments, because what worked last quarter may not necessarily be what we need to do to continue. We need to be open to other possibilities.
Right. Yeah, that variable effect, and the fact that and similar to what you heard yesterday on a football story, I've heard of football coaches that have plays that they will actually hide all season and then bring it up for one special occasion, because they know that that's a reveal, because there's so much film and technology nowadays about the schemes and stuff like that. But just being able to adjust to that and be able to know that in my own life, professional life, that you have to be adaptable and you have to be as nimble as you possibly can when you're dealing with those type of things. Exactly.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about that now. So you played tennis, graduated from SIU, Edwardsville, and then did you come back to work in Rockford, or what was that? I can't remember. What was the tenure that happened after college?
So when I was growing up, I have a lot of family down south.
Okay.
And my father is involved in the corrugated industry, which in layman's terms is packaging, brown boxes, cardboard, basically. And that's not, when kids are growing up, they're not like, oh yeah, like I want to be in the packaging industry when I grow up. I mean, it's not like a sexy industry or anything like that.
Racehorses, professional tennis player, packaging. All right.
It's all over the place here. But so I always envisioned myself moving away from, like many kids growing up in this area, and just in general, I mean, you always want, the grass is always greener, right? Yeah. And so I always thought, I'd move down south, do something there, invent myself. And then the older I got, there was some mutual interest. My father wanted me to continue the legacy of the family business, Midwest Packaging Container. Okay. And I remember us having a conversation in between summers in college, being like, hey, I want this to happen, but you need to want this. You need to want this as well. And so I said, in typical young bravado fashion, well, let's see, let's see. It's like,
keep my options open, Dad.
Keep my options open, Dad, whatever. But I interned there in between summers and between college, and even at a young age, I was like, wow, this is exciting. Mm-hmm. There's potential here. Like, we are in a niche that is unique, that we don't have a lot of competition. And not only that, from an economical standpoint, but also from a sociological standpoint, just how exciting it is to be able to lead people. Mm-hmm. because like I discussed earlier about tennis, you're not leading anyone, you're just on your own. And just the idea of being able to kind of make an impact with a group of people and see them interact and make a difference collectively was really eye-opening to me.
So after doing that internship, you not only saw what was happening with the industry that your father was in, when the business was in, and how that was more than you had thought from that end of it, but then you saw the human capital part of it, the culture element of that, and then more the leadership part of it, and that intrigued you.
It did. Yeah, it really did, because it was a game changer, because it wasn't just about me, and as people, and myself included, absolutely, as I got older, you're kind of worried about yourself, right? You have this ego, when you're growing up. It's very younger kids are very egocentric, and I certainly was, no exception. In college, I was all about myself, and how can I do things to help myself. And when I started my working career professionally, you had to kind of set aside that ego. You had to kind of put that away and say, how can I help the people around me succeed? And that was something that just kind of was the start of a development of that kind of selfless leader that I aspire to be every day. That people are depending on you. You have a job to do, and there's an opportunity to make an impact that can really resonate. Okay.
So when did you actually make the leap to go to Midwest full time? What year was that?
So it was right after college. It was graduated in 2011, moved back to Rockford, bought a home, and started working there right away.
Okay, so in 2011. Right, okay. And then what role were you in when you first came in? And I'm assuming your dad was still a major part of Midwest at that time. And yeah, tell us a little bit about that part and what that whole experience was like.
So I think my title when I first got started there was like executive vice president or something like that. But I was kind of bouncing around. I didn't really have I was trying to find my way in the company structure, and some of the senior management was kind of confused about what my role was as well. And I'll tell you this quick story about how I kind of ascended to the top. So we have these meetings weekly. They're called management meetings. So all the people who represent all the departments get together weekly, and we sit down and discuss big issues, right? And so usually my father sits at the top of the table and the head of the table, and so we have these meetings. I think I've been there for about a year or two, and he says, "Rob, why don't you sit at the head of the table today? Just a different perspective." I said, "Okay." I'm naive. I'm just, "Okay, sure." And I sat at the front of the table, and he sat way down at the end, and the meeting started, and he usually kicks it off, and he said, "Good morning, everyone. I just want to make a quick announcement that Rob is now the president, and he's responsible for everything, and you have any questions or concerns, you can contact him." I'm sitting there like deer in the headlights, like I think I was 23 or 24 years old at the time.
Oh, wow.
And this table full of older people who established, worked there for 25, 30 years, sitting there, and they all just go turn, and I'm just like,
Did he mic drop and then just walk out of the room, or what?
He was down at the end, and he said, "Hey, yeah."
And he just observed, so he just kind of watched what was going on.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, and that kind of tells you a little bit about his kind of management style, but also I appreciate it looking back on it, because I've always been someone who enjoys a trial by fire.
Sure.
I enjoy jumping in with both feet and learning by doing.
Okay, all right. Wow, so that was probably a pretty big thing. So you're with the company maybe 2 years, but year and a half, 2 years, and it's interesting because I do consulting for a handful of different businesses, and a lot of times it's family businesses. Second generation, third generation. You are the second generation or third generation?
Second generation.
Second generation. Okay, and a lot of times there is this element where it's either ultra defined, where the person's going to be at, and it seems to be the hoops are much smaller and tighter for them to get through, or it's looser and a lot of times when it's done well, it's done that way, and you see that the young protege is getting to see different subsystems within the overall system, which will then give them a great advantage when they actually do ascend to that role of president. So, and that's what happened, right? So now you're in the president role, and so yeah, what was that like? I mean,
well, and I want to preface this by saying that I did jump around different departments, and I did my due diligence and things like that about learning the company, and later on, I'm kind of like, Dad, what the heck,
Sure.
And he said, you're ready, in his estimate. He didn't share that with me. Obviously, he didn't give me any warning, but he said, hey, you were ready to start taking your lumps, and I did. There's learning moments and things that I wish I could have handled better, but it was time. Whether I knew it or whether he obviously knew it, but whether I knew it or not, it was time to actually start getting that experience and start kind of forging that vision on proving myself every day. Because again, I had the perception when you get handed an opportunity like that is that you didn't earn this. You're my boss just by someone giving you something instead of by merit, and so I had to kind of defeat that stereotype, defeat that kind of image that was in the heads of so many people that all around that table.
Sure. And how much do you think, looking back on it now, because that was, you said 2011, so that was 8 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. How much do you think that was that something that was actually being said? Was that something that was in the rumor mill, or was that something that you were putting two and two together, that was in the back of your head, and it drove you to work even harder because you already mentioned that you had a tendency to be a perfectionist?
Well, both. I remember there was one specific gentleman, he's a general manager, he's worked there for 30 years. Kind of I'd generously say he's kind of a serious, grumpy guy, I would say. Okay. Intimidating figure. And I remember we were having an argument or discussion, I guess you could say, about an issue, and it was getting kind of heated, and I remember he was just very flustered, and he just said, well, you just don't know as much as I do, and that's just it. You just don't know, and it just came out. He's like, you just don't know, and I said, I understand that you think that way, or that may be true. You do know more about the corrugated industry, but in my opinion, we're going to do this, and we're going to go this way and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, shame on me. But willing to take that leap and kind of experiment and not be afraid to fail, because we were doing things. And that is the strength and also the weakness of having an established management team and someone who's been there for a long time. You get this, you hear this all the time. We've always done it this way. It works this way. This is what we've always done. And every time I heard that, I cringed, because every time you hear we've always done it this way, I hear we haven't tried anything else. We haven't discovered the possibilities of other scenarios, and we're going to be very limited in our potential.
Yeah. It's interesting when you say that phrase, we've always done it, this is what we've always done, and I have the same response. I have same kind of reaction, and I've learned that when I'm on my game, right, is then that leads me to ask some questions. Mm-hmm. Well, why is it that way? And if they're telling me their why is because of they can't, or they shouldn't, or they're supposed to, or something like that, then I know I need to move forward with challenging that paradigm. Mm-hmm. If they have a story about why this is what we've come to be doing for the latest season or whatever it is, well, now I at least know their story and why they're entrenched into this mindset. But usually, if they're telling me their why, there's probably also that element and some room in which we can continue to evolve and adapt, and where the next one is.
Right. Yeah. And exactly. Questions usually break that down. And when you kind of probe deeper into, well, why do we do it this way? Have we tried something else, or is it possible to do this? And if you start getting answers like, well, it's because we can't do this, or that just won't work, and we never tried it, but that's too much time, or that's a whole other thing that we just don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. The truth starts to kind of leak out, and then he said, so you're telling me there's really not a reason we haven't tried this, or there's not a real, practical, you haven't tried this and failed and tried this and failed. You just decided that that's too much work.
Right. Or too much risk, or too much, too much is going to be taking them out of their comfort zone, or whatever it may be. So when you think about your 8 years at Midwest, and not knowing much about how the business was in 2011 compared to how it is today, what would you say some of the, and I know there's a ton of different factors that may have played into it. Yes, one of the factors are that you took over as president. That's one of them. The economy is different now, than 2011. There's a lot of variables that may have played into this, but what are some of the things that you're doing now, Midwest is doing now, and that you could say, we started moving in this direction by asking those why questions, or whatever?
Well, one thing that I'm really, really proud of, and I want it to be a legacy, and I want it to live beyond me, is creating these processes and creating these policies that are really people focused. Okay. And so I've worked tirelessly to kind of create like a workplace culture that really empowers people. Okay. And so that really fires me up, and that kind of gets me up in the morning, is that I'm going to go in and I'm going to put so-and-so person in a position to succeed. I'm gonna make this the best job they've ever had. I'm gonna make them excited about getting up, just as excited about getting up and going to work as I am. Okay. Because that should be infectious, right? And through that, we're gonna get some really cool stuff done. Gotcha. When you put people in positions to succeed, and we have. When I took over, and it was about 2012. We had about 50 employees and did about $10 million in sales, and we had a 100,000 square foot facility. And then as we sit today, we're at 110 employees. Wow. We have about $20 million in sales. We've doubled our sales, and we've added on a 50,000 square foot facility. And then we've invested, millions and millions of dollars into new efficiencies, technologies, and machinery.
Gotcha. So just for individuals who may not at all know much about packaging or any of that aspect of it, they may, because they just don't understand, they may think this is just some element of assembly or factory work or that part of it. When you talk about being able to create processes for them to be growing as employees, to be growing, to be excited about their job, if you can give us like maybe just a snapshot of what would that look like?
Sure. So we do a lot of like pure manufacturing. So our facility is just full of like machinery that's turning sheets, corrugated sheets, into boxes, and then all the fun stuff that happens along that process. But something like an example of that would be that the operators have more autonomy to work within a system as they're looking at their jobs, and they're kind of arranging their schedule, and they have the autonomy to be able to say, okay, I want to make this adjustment or that adjustment, or just be able to affect their output, more so. And that is a key point in what I'm trying to instill, is that, the traditional model is, hey, you have workers and you have owners or managers. Mm-hmm. And who owns that output? Well, the owners or the managers, right, own the output, and the workers are disassociated from their output. When you actively engage people to be participants into their output, and they feel a connection to what they're making, and they feel this is the reason that we're making it this way, and I understand the process, and I understand why we're doing it, and I understand the end customer and the end goal, and that goal is communicated throughout the whole company, and it's everywhere, and it's, you could ask somebody, you can go up to anyone in my company and say, hey, what is the goal and what are we doing, and they'd be able to tell you. Mm-hmm. Because they understand. It's not, I'm here to punch a clock and I'm here to make some boxes. Mm-hmm. That's not a fun career. Sure.
Sure.
On its face value. So just being able to kind of have a clear and present and transparent system up and down the levels of communication all the way through.
So talk a little bit about the challenge that I'm just assuming happened.
Oh, yeah.
As you were leading this maybe more experienced management team, upper management team, and you're moving from a management style. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I would just assume that there was an element that, I guess for lack of better words, of micromanaging and pieces, right? Piecemealing and versus leading, because to be able to have operators have that much autonomy, there's got to be a level of trusting them. They have to necessarily know that they're being trusted, but to have your next level of management being able to not sabotage that, because you can do it in words, but to actually believe in it, it goes back to that tennis thing. Psychologically, you can look a certain way, but if you psych yourself out, it doesn't matter, right? And it can go the other way. So what things have you learned, and what things have you had to put in place to ensure that the vision's carried out, that it's not this, back when I was working as a consultant, we'd call it malicious compliance. They would nod at me and tell me that, yes, they understood what was going on, and then when they walked out of the room, we realized we had more work to do because...
and I'm glad you brought that up, because there are three types of employees, and do some leadership training and some executive training and things like that, and this was kind of eye-opening to me because I never really thought about it this way. So you got your engaged employees that are like Mr. Midwest, they're Mr. or Mrs. Midwest. They're all excited. They wear their company gear.
Midwest tattoo.
They're all excited. They come into work. They're infectious, with their personality and their enthusiasm.
Sure.
And that's, a good corporation is going to have, a fantastic organization is going to have like 25% people, because 1 in 4 people are just fired up,
Sure.
The overwhelming majority of people are just, you could try to reach them, you could do whatever, but they're just kind of there. They come in, they do some stuff, they're happy about what they do, but they're clocking in, they're clocking out, they're going home. It's not the highlight of their day, and, that's understandable. But then you have that percentage of, and you can call them toxic or whatever you like to say, that are just, they think it stinks, they don't like it, they don't, they may be going along just because they're being dragged along, but most importantly and most damaging is that they're infecting other people. They're taking those middle people that are just kind of not engaged, just kind of there, and they're turning them into toxic people with their toxicity. And unfortunately, if you can do all you want, you can invest in those folks with training, with classes, with encouraging words, and you can have one-on-ones, and you can sit down, and you may be able to get them out of that and say, hey, really, buy in, let's do this. And I've done that. I've had employees that were very, very like, I don't like this is not my thing, and I don't like the direction we're going, and then they've seen the results and they've seen the progression, and they bought in. And then there's people who are just never going to change. And the gentleman that I was referring to earlier, who was very, very stiff about the transition, he retired. It was kind of a mutual decision, but he needed to move on. It was just not going to be ever his thing.
Sure.
And that's okay, and that's okay. And I've done a lot of tweaking to the management team, acquiring key people that I know fit our model and our culture. And then the people that aren't going to come along, they kind of need to, you either need to come along or you're not, and then that's going to happen. But anytime there's an organizational cultural overhaul, you're going to have that kind of resistance. But that means you're moving forward. It means you're going in a direction. And people can either go along with it, or they could choose not to. But we're going this direction.
Right. And as my educational background and what I do professionally as a social worker, we talk about this concept. I remember very first graduate social work class I took, and it was this idea of the person in the environment, and it was the idea was that the person isn't necessarily bad, right, or just dysfunctional or whatever it may be, or the environment itself may not be dysfunctional, though we could argue on both ends that there are some things that people do in some environments that are toxic. But more times than not, it's a mismatch. Is that the person isn't matched up with the right environment. I know for me, I am a person that enjoys being around people, interacting with people. I get energy from that. I may have developed some skill levels with working with things, but even on its best day, it still takes me more energy than I get from it. Where when I'm working with people, it's the opposite. I get more than it takes. So that's a good match. And I think that happens when people are at work. I said, this is the direction we're going in. This is the flow. This is where the culture that we're going to create, and we are creating. It's not that you're a bad person, it's just maybe a bad fit.
Yeah, exactly. And it could be a personnel thing. You know, maybe you're just around people you don't mesh with, or maybe you just don't enjoy your job. And we try to do as good a job as we possibly can with matching personalities in departments and also matching skill sets, because you could have a fantastic operator who is a world beater. He does a fantastic job. Output is awesome. He's a happy guy. And you say, okay, Gary, an opportunity just came out to be a supervisor. Let's elevate you. Let's reward you for your great job. He gets into that role and he's like, oh gosh, now I got to tell people what to do. Oh, this is really making me uncomfortable. And now he's dreading coming into work. And that you just took a great employee who's has an infectious personality and just very positive, and just made him into a nervous, you just made him not enjoy his work experience anymore, because it wasn't because anything really changed in him. It's just you gave him a different responsibility set that just didn't fit him.
Well, and I think there's an element to creating really thriving, growing culture is that you have that formal leader, right, that's in that supervisory role, and then you have the informal leader. And there may be ways of keeping Gary in as an informal leader role, and so that he just does the part that comes easy for him, but then he can be contagious with his enthusiasm in that informal role and not have the stress of maybe the paperwork or the evaluation piece of it or whatever it is. And I think that helping individuals at the management level to be able to recognize that and see that, to doing it, leading that from the head coach position down to the assistant coach's position, I think that is key. Not easy, but I think it's key, because especially if the company or the corporation is set up and they have really rigid lanes, this is how we promote, this is how we recognize people. I think then there's risk. And I understand that we need to have some uniformity, but it doesn't necessarily help us adapt and make changes while the game's going on.
Yeah, and so many people think, take every opportunity you can, or saying yes to things, and that's how you grow. Well, some of the best decisions that are made in an organization are no. There's a couple people, younger people in my organization who we're very excited about. They've come in and they've really made an impact, and they're buying in and they're excited and they're drawn in. And anytime an opportunity in a different department comes up, everyone's always like, let's do them. Let's promote them. They deserve it. They deserve it. And I have to kind of take a step back and be like, are we just throwing this person in because they happen to be the person that is on our mind, and this opportunity just came up, or is this the right opportunity for this person? Right. And it's like, calm down, everyone. You don't need to throw this person into this because that's maybe not what they want to do, or maybe the best use of their skills. And so, just being able to recognize and kind of fit. It's like a puzzle piece, really. And if it doesn't fit in, it's going to not be a great fit for the overall picture.
Right. Well, I want to ask you now, you're involved in the community in a lot of different areas, in a lot of different ways, and that's, I think in a lot of ways, that's how you and I got to know each other. So tell us a little bit about your involvement at a community level with Rockford, and then you have some aspirations of how you can bring that at another level. So tell us a little bit about some of the different organizations you're involved with, and so I can learn about them.
Yeah. Well, there's part of that whole process about rearranging my management team and working really hard on that is for like first 5 years, that's all I was doing. Midwest every day, long hours, wanting to get the processes in place to make sure that, if I took a morning off to do something, or if I joined a different board or did something that, I wouldn't come back and there'd be fires everywhere,
Sure.
And so just recently, the past few years, I've felt good about the management room that I've assembled, and some of the people are feeling good about their autonomy and finally buying in. And I'm like, okay, I'm feeling good about this. I'm feeling confident about the organization that I put in place. Now, let's take a step back. Look at our community as a whole, how we fit into our community, and how can I give back in that way too? How can I add some of my skills and my enthusiasm to the community? And so I've joined a few really great boards that I'm really, really passionate about.
Okay.
The first one I joined, it's near and dear to my heart, is the Natural Land Institute. Okay. I did Leadership Rockford through the Rockford Chamber of Commerce, and so you get done with, that's a really intensive class. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, but so when you get done with it, you're like, okay, now what? It's like, what do I care about? What am I going to do?
Sure.
And so I love nature. I love being outside. Yeah. And so the Natural Land Institute was a great fit. I really believe in their mission of conserving and protecting land here locally. A couple other organizations that I've been really involved in recently. I'm the founding member of 100 Men Who Give a Damn, Rockford. And 100% of our proceeds go to the Family Peace Center, which is a cause that I've really taken up because Rockford really needs it. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to be the community that we want to be, that we aspire to be, we have to protect our most vulnerable. We have to be a caring community. We have to be a loving community. And what's going on in our community right now in terms of domestic violence is none of those things. Mm-hmm. It's driving away businesses, and it's driving away folks from our community. Our violent crime statistics are higher than the national average, in large part to domestic violence and the scourge of domestic violence. And just finding a voice for those survivors and finding peace for people who've been through such a terrible experience, and to streamline that whole process with the Family Peace Center has really been something that I've been getting behind. Okay. And then recently I'm just gotten into the political arena as well to make impact at that level as well. And I'm running for the Winnebago County Board in the 17th District. And Gotcha. My campaign just kicked off about a month ago, and very excited about that as well.
So when you think about being able to be part of the county board, right? Mm-hmm. What would you be hoping to be able to achieve? I know this is kind of it's probably, I guess I don't even know what I'm asking, so it's probably a loaded question. So I'm asking from me, not knowing much about politics and all that. Why do you want to be on the board? What would you want to be able to do on the board?
Well, when I took a step back and I'm kind of looking at our community, the city of Rockford has made tremendous strides recently. Mayor Tom McNamara, since he's been elected, has done a fantastic job of really steadying our presence, kind of solidifying our vision and our goals and what we want to do in our community. And there's just so many exciting things going on here. There's a lot of like rock stars at different levels. A lot of really great leaders that I admire a lot around here. And then when you're looking at where some of the stumbling blocks have been at the kind of political board level, Winnebago County Board has struggled. It's lacking leadership. It's lacking vision. Frankly, I don't think this is out of line to say it's lacking common sense in a lot of cases. It's been frustrating to watch. It's been in the news a lot recently. And so in terms of like potential impact for what we can get done as a community and as a county, that just was a natural fit to try to help out there.
Gotcha. Okay. And so, because I know that that was one of the areas that you're now moving and aspiring to do, and so from what you're understanding, what goes into place? Because that my average listener probably doesn't necessarily know what goes into place to run for the county board. So what goes in place to see that through?
So the county board's split up into 20 different districts, and there are 20 different elected representatives from those districts. There is a chairman position, though that's been in the news a lot, quite controversial with what's been done to the chairman. But this board gets together and decides, sets budgets. There's obviously Winnebago County Sheriff's budgets. There's all kinds of different municipalities under the Winnebago County Board. They're directly impacted, Rockford obviously being the biggest municipality. So there's quite a lot that is impacted, and it's kind of flown under the radar for a while. People didn't really realize all the things that happen at the county level until unfortunately, until it's in the news in a negative light, that this is what they're not doing or this is what they're not achieving. And really the time is now. The time is really now. And I could have waited, or I could have gotten more involved in different ways, but I felt strongly that every year and every moment and every month and all the time that's passing is really wasted time for us to kind of realize our vision and realize our potential and kind of not kick the can down the road, on budgetary issues or other issues that we're not addressing. We need to do it now.
So when you think of your experience as an athlete, your experience and what you've done with Midwest, what you've experienced at Midwest, and then some of these other organizations, what things would you want to be able to bring when elected, if elected? We'll say when elected, right? What parts do you think you'll be able to glean off of from an athletic standpoint, growing up in the family you grew up with, to the Midwest, and your experience with the Midwest packaging? What things do you uniquely want to bring to the board?
Well, I think that, with my experience with Midwest, especially just coming into a situation and doing an organizational cultural overhaul, and knowing how long that process takes and how difficult that process is, because believe me, the Winnebago County Board needs that. It needs a cultural overhaul in terms of just redefining what our goals are and what we need to achieve, and just the infighting and the lawsuits and stuff like that. It's dysfunctional. And so I think I bring a kind of unifying skill of, hey, let's get to the table, let's relate to each other, and most importantly, let's get things done. You don't have to be buddy with everyone. You don't have to be friends, outside of this meeting room, but, we will respect each other. We will have goals. We will have things we need to get done. And just being able to to have that communication skill and that background and being a leader of people and kind of unifying people, because frankly sometimes I think that I'm just like putting people in the room and just being like, let's work this through sometimes. Sure. More so than actually the traditional role, because it's so much communication.
Well, it'll be interesting, right? Because what you just said, I think, is probably the element, if I'm understanding correctly, right, at the board level, the county board level, if the role of chairman is shifting and changing, then there is not necessarily one particular leader who's envisioning everything for the board and then working at casting that vision and sending that vision. There's going to be 20 different districts, right? And how does there get to be one particular direction in which we're going in, and how to go about inviting people, casting that vision, inviting people into that vision, and then getting that first and second follower, and seeing some follow through with that. That's going to be challenging. But with what you just said about Midwest, because your leadership style was to be able to bring all these talented managers together and for them to collectively work out how do we develop this process, It sounds like you've had some experience with doing that, and so that'll be an interesting challenge to do. But it definitely sounds like you've had some experience with that, so that'll be good. I know one other thing that I wanted to ask you about, because you love the outdoors. And a couple years ago, I think it was now, you went on a trip out east, but like far east.
Far east.
Yeah. And why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and what was probably some of the biggest things that you took from that trip, and why did you go, and what was your why about that trip, and what did you take from it?
Well, what was really important and impactful about that trip especially is that as we've kind of talked about, my upbringing and some of the things that I'm doing here, in Midwest and obviously in the community, is that, at a fairly young age, I kind of dealt with a lot of responsibilities and a lot of things. Things have been thrust upon me and things that I've taken on willingly. And just, there was a few years ago where I was just kind of struggling with the weight, because everyone has responsibilities they go through the day, and it could be the simplest things, your day-to-day activities and your chores. Oh gosh, I got to get the kids ready for bed. I got to feed them. I got to get laundry done. I got to also work and support myself, and how we kind of process all the things that we take on throughout the day, and how we kind of reach that kind of point where we feel, that we have self-care, that we have a sense of self, and we have a kind of a grounding kind of like moment in our day where we can kind of go, just kind of like let it all go and just feel good, and feel a sense of self and a sense of peace. And especially now in 2019, when we're so attached to our phones and all these images are going into our head, and I kind of found a few years ago that I was dealing with kind of a bad sense of self, and a bad sense of I had bouts of anxiety, which I never had before. I was social anxiety. I used to go into rooms, no problems at all, give speeches, and then I was having like panic attacks almost about certain things, and it kind of brought to light, it's like, hey, you need to align who I am with all the things you're doing, process, and also have this like moment of peace that you need to reach. And travel has always been kind of a way that I've reconnected with myself. And so this trip, I didn't really plan it. It was just kind of happened to me. There was a travel group that takes a 3-week tour of Thailand. I didn't know anyone on this trip. It was kind of a sperm of the moment thing. I just signed up for it just because I was having this kind of crisis of sorts, and it was the perfect trip for me, and to kind of get to know myself, and also just find yourself lost, in the jungle of Far East Asia. It was just a very humbling and enlightening experience.
Sure. Okay. And what would you say from that experience, and of course not necessarily even knowing what you were going, you just knew you needed to do something. What would you say is one of the biggest things that you took from that? How would they say it? What from Thailand did you bring back to Rockford via Rob? What was probably the biggest lesson or one of the biggest lessons?
I think one of the biggest lessons is that, we would go these places in Thailand, and these are poverty-stricken areas. People that are obviously struggling to just get their basic needs met. And they call Thailand, I think it's a land of a million smiles or 1,000 smiles or something, and it's true. You go to these places where you assume these people would be miserable, and they would be, angry, or there would be lots of crime, and these people were smiling, and they're welcoming, and they're wonderful. And we spent a few days in a village in the north part of Thailand. These people had next to nothing, and we did some volunteering and work with children, and it was just really kind of inspiring to see, that level of sense of self, and that level of, though I may not have much materialistically, I have this sense of self, and I have this positive attitude that I'm handling these things, I'm processing them, and I'm happy, with the things that I do have, and bringing that back, that kind of mentality that things may not be perfect. I may not have achieved what I wanted to achieve, but there's things in front of me, and there's things that I already have within myself that just really give me a sense of peace.
Nice. Well, Rob, I think of, and I'm glad you were able to share that story about your experience in Thailand. I think from the things that you learned in athletics, and then what you learned initially at Midwest, and the excitement you had at Midwest, and the possibility you saw there, and then wanting to bring and create a culture in which other people would love coming to work as well, because they could create their own space and be part of the process, and then taking that vision and wanting to bring it to Rockford, and at the county level as well. I appreciate you sharing that story. I appreciate you letting other people know that that's what you're doing at Midwest, and what you envision wanting to do here at a local level as well. So thank you for being on the show. And as always, whenever we get a chance to have conversation, I always appreciate your insight and your observations. So thank you again, and for being with us on the journey.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
If you get and I didn't ask you, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So I have a website, campaign website. It's voteyoungs17th.com.
Okay.
So you can get involved a couple different ways or reach out for different things.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you for being with us today. As you listen to Rob's story and his vision of what he wants to do as a leader, not only at the business level, but also now at the political level, at the local level, and how we can make a difference. As we talk many times in here, we have to first find that light within us so that we can be a light for others in their darkness. And I appreciate Rob sharing his story, and I appreciate you listening, and look forward to being with you again next week. Thank you.